It's so nice to welcome you on our second Microplastics for Breakfast webinar with guests. Our today's guest is distinguished Dr. François Galgani. He's a researcher from France, IFREMER. I know him for some time now, and I'm really happy that I'm able to host him today. First, we will have a short introduction from me, then we will go to Dr. Galgani's presentation for 45 minutes, then we will have a very short interview, and then I will give the floor to you participants and researchers to ask him any question you want. Francois is very nice that he will stay with us for another 1.5 hours, or at least as long as it will be necessary to host one-on-one sessions with you who registered for this part. So let's begin. I'm Andrea Palatinos. I come from Slovenia. It's a small country in the Adriatic Sea in the heart of Europe. And I did a little bit of microplastic research back in 2010. And I realized in 2016, I stopped working for the Institute. I worked at the Institute for Water of the Republic of Slovenia, and then later moved on to policy, to ministry, and later on even to private sector, to companies. So in all of my time, I realized that when I started doing microplastic research, I was one here in Slovenia and one of the few in the Adriatic region. But now I see there are a lot of microplastic researchers, and in Slovenia especially, their number grew immensely. And I wanted to offer them a community, somehow a platform where they could mingle, talk to each other, raise questions, help each other. And I'm doing that as a private company, so it's not publicly funded, and this is something I want to keep for many, many years. So this is the beginning. This picture represents here the first meetup of micro and nanoplastic researchers in Slovenia that happened last year, where almost 50 people gathered. It was very nice and very informative. And I'm doing it still. I'm organizing events. I want to start a community also broader in Croatia, in the Adriatic region, with events. In just like last week, I organized the first microplastics researchers meeting in Croatia, which went really well, I think. It was wonderful to meet all these researchers in Croatia. I plan 2 more webinars this year, similar to this one, as we host today Francois, and the last time we hosted Dr. Giuseppe Soaria. I want to organize in collaboration with Institute Josef Stefan from Ljubljana Nanoplastic Forum in October this year. In November, I already arranged to host an event on microplastics in the air together with the private company Mikcelje from Slovenia. And next year, first thing on my agenda will be an event about solutions, prevention and mitigation of micro and nanoplastic pollution. My webinars wouldn't be possible without my supporter. This is Louis, that's Ljubljana's University Incubator. I'm their mentoree. They mentor me on my private endeavor, and I'm really thankful for that. Their team also made sure that our designs look perfect. Well, I want to welcome you all today. As you can see, you come really from all over the world. There were like 90 participants registered to this today's event. I hope more will join us. Now we're 40 currently. And you can see majority come from Slovenia, which I'm very happy. And the next one is from Croatia. So that's the thing that we're establishing now, the community here. But nevertheless, India is the 3rd place, Italy, Greece, Portugal, and so on. And as you can see, research and education institutes today are most numerous, while also private companies joined us, NGOs, and public authorities. So as you can see, we're a very colorful bunch. So that's very nice. Okay, I will not keep you waiting much longer. Francois, if you're ready, I would suggest to start now with a little bit about your presentation. I had a pleasure to first time meet Francois in 2011. Francois, I never told you that, but the first time I saw you was actually in Hawaii, in Honolulu, when there was the 5th International Marine Debris Conference. And I was a beginner then. I was really a young girl trying to see what's going on in marine litter world. And when I saw you, I was like, oh, that's Francois. You were like a pop star to me because I only read your articles, never have met you. So for me, it was very exciting. Oh my God, it's Francois. I almost jumped to you and asked you for a signature. Anyway, we collaborated very nicely, I believe, in technical group on marine litter in European Commission's work group. But I have to tell today that Francois comes actually, it's a global citizen, I would say. You come from Uturoa, if I get this right, and you traveled all over the world. Now you're currently living in Tahiti, so you're calling us from there. You did your PhD in 1983. I was born in 1980, so you were very early. And actually, you started microplastics and marine litter research very early. And you're an amazing photographer, I must say. I follow you on your Facebook, and everywhere you go, you post a bunch of nice photos wherever you are. And very interesting fact, Francois participated at more than 70 scientific cruises. So very, very experienced researcher, I would say. He worked in various laboratories, Tokyo University, Stanford University, IFREMER, coordinated the work of many international expert groups for scientific institutions, as you can see, United Nations and Regional Sea Convention and the European Commission. So many also leading work, management role. Participated in many global initiatives, has been board member for the EU Horizon Mission, Europe Mission, Restore Our Oceans and Waters. And what is very important, maybe for most of you, that he's an editor-in-chief for the international journal Marine Pollution Bulletin. And he was responsible for the chapter Marine Litter of the United Nations Ocean Assessment in 2021. So Francois, welcome, very welcome. And I host you because I asked Slovenian researchers last year, who do you want to hear? Who do you want to talk with? And you were one of the names they mentioned. So actually you are somehow wished a guest from our researchers or researcher community. So I thank you very much for joining us today. And I offer you now the floor, and later I will offer researchers floor to ask you questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you very much for the very surprising introduction, listing all the things I've done. The point is that I'm becoming old now, and it's more the young scientists that will be more active in next year. So this is important, that maybe they take information, but I mean, they still, I would say, remain confident about the future because there is so much to do. Okay, thank you very much. And really happy to be with you today. I understood that you are mostly from the Adriatic Sea, but I also understood that there are some from all over the world. So good morning and good evening, or good day or good night to all of you. So I will try to give an overview of the different types of pollution, because we'll go more in details on marine litter and then plastic pollution, microplastics and so on. And then give information that will be more on the marine aspect of marine pollution, because this is my specialty. And I hope that that will be important and useful for you. So may we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I think that to start, we all have something like a typical singular perception of the ocean. That could be exotism, that could be travel, that could be mystery, that could be, sunset, that could be power, and so on. And the problem is that beside of the sea, we do have the land with all the pollution. And this is I would say, the main problem of the ocean. And this is what we have to solve. The next slide, please. So I will try to give an overview of the different main type of pollution. First of all, the top left, you have the hydrocarbons with the number of spills that have decreased in the recent years. What is important to know is that all types of pollution may have a link with plastic pollution or microplastics. For instance, hydrocarbons are exploration and production are the source of energy to craft the plastics and so on. But also, paint, for instance, may generate microplastic particle paints from hulls and ships. And you see, any kind of pollution, metals can settle on plastic and so on. So any type of pollution may have some interaction with plastic. And this is an important point, because it's not just plastic or microplastic, but all that is related to plastic or microplastic pollution. So we have the black tides, understanding that It could be from natural origin for 40% of the black tides, I mean emissions of hydrocarbons, and just only a few percent, 3 to 5% from spills, when in fact chronic inputs are very important from rivers and so on. What is important also, besides we have also pesticide, we have trace metals, we have insecticide and different kinds of organic pollutants, persistence or not, with emergent pollutants also, and we have some, I would say, unbalanced eutrophication and dystrophies, and causing some what we call red tides or brown tides or green tides and so on. So we have black, red, green, brown, and next slide, please. We actually have also, because of the recent years and the use, more important use of plastic, we have the white tides, what we call the white tides. And what is important is that the annual production is still increasing and will increasing for many years. Annual input of the oceans are under discussion, I will say, and depends on who is, I mean, trying to assess it, and it ranges probably from 1 to 15 millions of plastic going to the sea every year. With very important also other information is that marine litter is everywhere. So you see, for instance, that Southeast Asia is the main source in the world, but the Mediterranean Sea is largely affected, and the main cause is the population, the number of inhabitants by the coast, and also the lack of water treatment and infrastructures to treat the waters and prevent plastic to enter the sea. So these two causes are very important. That's the reason why we may have areas that are largely covered by plastics at sea, such as Egypt, for instance, in the Mediterranean Sea. Next slide, please. Okay, so marine litter, I would say, is very diverse. It may be classed by composition, for instance, plastic or metal or glass and so on, or by uses, like, for instance, fishing gear. So it may range for very large pieces, what we call mega, and to very small, teeny, and we'll come to that later. But wood could be very important in some areas, for instance, while it's degrading, so probably less important in terms of impact. But it's very complex, and because of the various sources, also we do have some difficulties to manage that pollution. Next slide, please. So what is important, actually, I think, is the notion that is, it's very recent. That notion is the notion of plastic cycle. It was one of the arguments of the European Commission to support the involvement of European member states in the plastic treaty process and negotiations and so on. Without any discussion on the plastic cycle, there was no involvement of Europe. That was a political position of the plastic cycle. Is not just only the cycle between what is coming from the after extraction production and so on, oil production, and then transformation, refineries and so on, pellets and so on, and then the crafting of different pieces, and then either recycling or the, plastic that are discarded directly in the environment, then coming to the sea, degrading microplastics and so on. This is one of the cycle, but we have also the links between the different components of the marine environment. And for instance, what is coming to the near shore, what is coming to open waters and so on. And you can see that in open waters, for instance, we have mainly in blue the fishing related debris, made most of them of plastics. In the deep sea floor, for instance, the plastic bottles in red are very important, while in the nearshore seafloor, we do have more plastic bags and wrappers, such as in nearshore open waters. And so you see that, the links between the different compartments are very important to understand the fluxes and to understand when they may go after and when they may accumulate. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another type of cycle is about the fluxes of microplastics. It was published by Sonk. The reference given on the slide is not correct. The real reference is from Sonk et al., while the one cited was about the cycling also. But what is important there is that you see that the fluxes to the bottom of the ocean is at the level of 6.8 million tons every year. And this is a huge amount. So it means that the seafloor is a sink for microplastics when the exchange interaction between the different compartments are very complex and not fully understood at this stage. So this is important, very important, that to consider that most of the plastic is going to the bottom. It may take some years for that, decades maybe, but at the end it will go mainly to the bottom where it accumulates. Sediments is very conservative and it may degrade before or after arriving on the seafloor. But I mean, actually, we know that the sediment is a sink, and this is where the largest. I mean, many studies are indicating that the amounts are increasing. When for the other compartments, it's not so clear about the change and long-term trends. I will come back on that later. Next slide, please. So one of the problems of plastic pollution is the diversity of sources. So you know well, I mean, the textile coming from a washing machine, for instance, transportation at sea, and cosmetics, and so on. You have top right an example of discharge that is by the sea. This is in Lebanon, and when I visited that site, I mean, there was a bulldozer just pushing directly all the debris to the sea, and generating large amounts that were transported with the currents to the north. So it means then to Syria, Turkey, Cyprus, and so on. And this is a real problem. On the left, you have the what we call fishing aggregating devices that are launched by the fishermen and to aggregate and to attract the fish. And in fact, they are losing some of them that are then stranding in many areas in the world, Indian Ocean, South Pacific Ocean, where all the tuna fishing industry is located. In the middle, you have an example of a remote island in the Pacific where the litter is accumulating and a bird in it. And I will say that besides, I mean, all the sources are very, I mean, it's a very long list of rivers, runoff, dumping, maritime transport, aquaculture, tourism, diffuse sources, and so on. And I think that there is one that must be considered, and that is not for now. This is extreme events. They are very important. In the case of the tsunami in 2011 in Japan, the Ministry of Japan evaluated the amount of debris that were transported to the sea at 5 million tons. 5 million tons for just one event. So it means that it's the same range of the whole amount of plastic that is entering the ocean in 1 year. So you can compare and you see that one extreme event, I mean, hurricane, for instance, or any kind of extreme event, I mean, the flooding, for instance, could be very important as well. In the Mediterranean, for instance, heavy rain in March or in November may bring a lot of litter at sea. And these extreme events are very important in terms of quantities that are going to the sea, and as not always well really considered, and there is no assessment on that for now. And I think this is an important point too. It may generate then microplastics for sure, but I mean the main source actually is for large debris, as you understand. Next slide, please. So microplastics are very important. If you go at sea and then you have taken manta trawl, this kind of surface net that is with wings on the side to make it floating. Then after 30 minutes only, at least in the Mediterranean Sea, you have top left the collectors that are after the net. And this is what you will see, what we call a soap of plastics. This is the usual term. And if you go, I mean, put that sample, one of the samples under the microscope, you will see what is shown, I mean, on the bottom right. And some, I mean, very different types of plastic, including one that is really round and is a pellet, but you have also fibers, you have also different colors and so on. And so it's a mix of, and it could reach, I mean, high amounts, like for instance, in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, where it has reached more than 64 million particles per kilometer square. 64 million particles per kilometer square. If you go down using a microscope, electronic microscope, then you will see, we will have more details about and how they degrade and so on. This is one of the main important topics actually that is considered by researchers. Next slide, please. So I will try to understand how it works about, I mean, how we can explain where the microplastics mainly, but large plastics as well, are accumulating in the ocean. So we have, I would say, five marine continents, marine oceanic basins, rather. I mean, you have North Pacific, North Atlantic, you have South Pacific, South Atlantic, and you have the Indian Ocean that is a semi-ocean because the northern part of is covered by the Asia. but it works the same way than the other. I mean, you have what we call the trade winds that are blowing from northeast to southwest in the northern hemisphere, and also southeast to northwest in the southern hemisphere, around the equator, only around the equator, the trade winds. And these trade winds, they are pushing the water to the west. And so if we take the example of the Atlantic, for instance, then the wind is blowing from the east at the equator to the west, then make the current, equatorial current, that is also going from the east to the west. And then it has been like that for, I mean, million and million years. And because of that, I mean, the current, residual current, is going from the east to the west at equator. And then it means that water is accumulating on the west of each basin. And Caribbean Sea, for instance, and then Gulf of Mexico, or Philippine and Philippine Island, and also Indonesia in the Pacific, and also it's accumulating as well. I mean, the Tanzania and so on in the Indian Ocean. And then when it comes, I mean, the water cannot go to the sky because it's accumulating, and we do have some difference in altitude between the west and the east. And so there is much water in the west than in the east. And because there is much water, it cannot go to the sky. Then it generates currents that are going to the north or the south, depending on the hemisphere. And if we take the example of the northern Atlantic, for instance, the generation of the current is very, I mean, the process is very well known. This is what we call the Gulf Stream. So the Gulf Stream is because there is too much water in the Gulf of Mexico because of the trade winds pushing them in that Gulf. And so for that reason, the water is going along the US coast, and then comes to Labrador, and then goes with the North Atlantic drift to the east again, then Europe, and the branch is going to the north, and the branch is going to the south, and to fill the deficit of water that is on the eastern part of the ocean. And because the trade winds have been pushing the water on the west, then, I mean, there is less water on the east, and so the water, this all is attracting the water from Europe, and then you have a circulating white water at the equator to the west, and then along the US coast, and then the North Atlantic drift, and then the water coming down to Africa. And it has been like that for, I mean, millions of years. And for that reason, I mean, in the middle, you have what we call the vortex or a eye. And like in a sink, for instance, then you will have everything that is floating that will concentrate. So sargasso, for instance, are algae. I mean, the word sargasso comes from Portuguese. It means brown algae that are floating and then concentrating in that area. And then you have small turtles, you have eels, for instance, and since decades you have microplastics and plastics that are accumulating in that area. This is the reason we have higher densities in these areas. But what is important to understand is that even if we have higher quantities, what they call garbage patches, or I mean continents, the seventh continent and so on, any word you can use, is far less plastic than it is in the Mediterranean Sea. Because the Mediterranean Sea is a closed basin, because it's a first destination, touristic destination in the world, 320 million people, because of the population around along the coast, and because of the maritime traffic, 30% of the maritime traffic going from Gibraltar to Suez. And for that reason, I mean, we have a lot of plastics that cannot go out of that basin and then accumulate. And the difference, I mean, it's quite important in terms of management, because if you want to manage plastic, that will be more efficient in the Mediterranean than it could be in the ocean, because the total amount in the ocean is just, I mean, some 100,000 tons, and it's not so much. It's not so much when you compare to the production. So it's always too much, but it's not as much as it is in coastal waters, especially in the Mediterranean or the Southeast Asia, Gulf of Bengal, and so on. So it means that to prevent all the plastic going to the Central Ocean, I would say it's better to prevent them entering the ocean in our coast. This is one very important point, I think. Next slide, please. Thank you. What is important also to understand is that, as I said before, most of the plastic, about 90%, maybe more, is on the seafloor. And with densities in the Mediterranean, for instance, in the Strait of Messina, that reached 1.6 million items per kilometer square. So you have top left is Japan, is China, sorry. On the left, this is Japan. Then you have Italy on the bottom right. You have France, either by a sub or by trawling. You see, for instance, the picture that is on the right is 10 minutes trawling in the south of France. In a nice place, it's very well for tourism and so on, but the people don't know that under the water on the seafloor, in some places that they are really accumulating, and it's really huge amount that you can find on the seafloor. Next slide, please. Then there was a paper that was published very recently from a colleague of us, Peter Harris, together with Thomas Mess and some others, trying to evaluate the amounts of microplastics on the seafloor. And they came to 3 million tons that may lie on the seafloor. That is very important because each microplastic is very limited in weight. And so 3 million tons means really a lot. When you know that, for instance, in the gyre of the Pacific, it's just a question of 5,000 tons only. And then on the right, you have, they are trying to, they did try to I would say, describe the fluxes and the fate of plastics and microplastics. And so the different place where they're accumulating, mainly on the continental shelf and also the deep sea bottom. And the process for the microplastics is very complex. It's not really sure about, but interestingly, they proposed the concept of marine plastic cloud. I mean, a place where, I mean, the microplastics are transiting, most probably with the marine snow to the bottom, and where they may remain because, you know, it has been said that the fouling of plastics could help them to sink, but in fact, the fouling could be, I mean, grazed by different animals. So it means that the plastic could have something like a yo-yo in the water more than that going directly to the bottom. And also the density at the bottom is higher, so it means that they may stop during the when they are sinking. And so it's very complex and not fully understood at the moment. But the concept of marine plastic cloud, I think, is very interesting because it may summarize the situation, something like actually we don't know, but a lot of exchange and interactions with the different compartments of the midwater. Next slide, please. So there have been a lot of studies trying to assess the amounts and trends. First of all, it was the first one was published by COSA, but it was limited in number of samples and also just focusing on microplastics. And there was a lot of competition at that time between scientists. And some like Eriksen proposed, I mean, evaluated the amount at the level of 5,000 billions of particles at the surface of the sea. And then it has been re-evaluated and reaching the paper from Isobe in 2021 at the level of 24,000 billions of microplastics. And so some provided more information. I mean, the paper from Sassinier, for instance, gave, I mean, the amounts that are exported or imported by each country. That is very interesting. So, you know, for instance, that I didn't calculate for the presentation, but I mean, for Slovenia, it could be, I mean, 5 tons exported or 6 tons imported from different countries. And also, I mean, providing the various countries where the plastics are coming from. So this is a very detailed studies, very interesting in terms of management. But we have many other. CANDOP, for instance, did provide some prediction about the stranding and also evaluating. And you have also the last work published by Eriksen about the trends. And he said that it could have been at the level of 170 thousand billions of particles, which seems to be very exaggerated at this stage. Next slide, please. So evaluating trends is a bit complex. If you look at the publication and the title, more often they are describing, I mean, evidence of accumulation and increase with the time and so on. But if you look in detail, it's not so easy to conclude. For instance, the paper top left of Hostil from UK, indicating that the rise of ocean plastic was still continuing. But in fact, if you go the histograms on the figure, you see that since, I mean, the years 2000, there is not so much increase. And if you look at the first papers describing the world microplastics published by Richard Thompson, a colleague of us, you see that after since the 90s, it has not been so increasing. And if you look at the paper, this is bottom right of Cara Lavender, for instance, that was published in Science in 2010. Then you see that, I mean, the amounts of plastics every year, so the cumulative amounts are increasing naturally, but I mean, annual inputs are not. And this is very interesting because for the World Ocean Assessment, the last, the numbers 2, we did add a review of all the papers dedicated to monitoring, and we tried to understand if it was really increasing or not. In fact, we do found some papers describing increase formally, but there are mainly focused on either on remote areas, such as remote island in the Pacific, for instance, or the Arctic Ocean, or the deep sea for microplastics. So it's clear that, I mean, in developed countries, like in Europe, for instance, increase are not clear. And there is no proven increase of marine litter. Even the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, it's not clear how OSPA is the same. It's not clear how the plastic is increasing in the ocean. That's very important because it means that there is a question: where is going the plastic? Because it's always coming and coming. So what is the idea, the concept that is coming now is that all this plastic is transported at sea to remote areas. And if there is no generation of plastic in some areas, I mean, just receiving the plastic coming from outside will increase the amounts. And we are still in the period of increasing in these areas. For instance, in the Arctic, the work from AVI shown that, I mean, there was a large amount of plastics that have been increased since the 2000s, for instance. And this is the same at Anderson in the South Pacific and some remote island in the Antarctic. And this is also the same for microplastics on the seafloor, when it's not for the large debris on the seafloor. So it means also that, I mean, the plastic on the seafloor are also degrading to microplastics, favoring the larger amount of microplastics. And actually, there is a very important interest to seafloor sediments, because I just would like to confirm that this is a thing for microplastics, and that will be a topic of interest for the next years. Next slide, please. Okay, about impact, there are many types of impact. You have all about impact of fishing, tourism, human health, and so on. When you consider, I would say, microplastics, it's a bit different. I think that human health could be one of the potential impacts. The release of chemical is, the mechanical effect of microparticles in the gut of some small organisms is as well. Nanoplastic is a real question, actually. And transportation of alien species is a very important question, because we don't have so much information on that, and the risk is very high. Next slide, please. So different types of impact, environmental impact. We do have entanglement, for instance, but it's not for microplastics. We have ingestion, and so ingestion is very special, because we do have some species that are more sensitive than some others, and for, I would say, so biological reasons, or I mean scientific reasons. And we may have two examples, for instance. The one on Fulmar, they are belonging to the family of Procellariiformes, family of birds, and this family, these birds, like the albatrosses and so on, Fulmar in the North Sea, they do have a special, I would say, special part of the stomach that is accumulating plastics. In fact, it has been accumulating limestone, for instance, and it was this pocket is done to crush the food and help to digest. And because of plastic at the surface of the sea and the birds picking them up from the surface, they're accumulating in the guts and in that pocket, and then they are helping to crush the food and then to digest and so on. So what is bad, if you see, for instance, a lot of plastic in the stomach, could be also good for the bird. And it's very controversial, that idea, but I mean, it may help I would say, the bird to survive. For any reason, any way, I mean, it's too much plastic, and I don't support, I mean, the idea of having this plastic to be ingested by birds to favor them in terms of digestion. But I mean, it's true that the reason that they keep is that it may help. We have also some other examples, some fish, like myctophids are living at the surface at night. They are coming at the surface, especially in the Mediterranean. It has been demonstrated in the Gulf of Genova. They are coming at the surface, and because this is a place where most of the microplastics are accumulating, they are eating them, and they are accumulating them as well. It was shown, I mean, a long time ago, 12 years ago. But what is important is that for microplastics in general, they will not kept in the digestive gland. You've seen the middle these green fluorescent particles that are in two pictures. These are on oyster. The work performed in my institution at IFREMER in Brest, and the one done by Capolbon on mussels, the other one. And it shows that the fluorescence is just remaining in the guts. And so this is very important in terms of impact, because it means that the plastic will not remain like if a human, for instance, a boy, just eat a piece of plastics, after 2 days, it will be excreted. For mussels or plankton or an oyster, that will be the same. For a fish is the same. For sea turtle is the same. So there was some experiment, for instance, done by Cole, and with the plankton, showing that for the plankton that are ingesting, so that those are not carnivores, that are eating passively, filter feeders, for instance, they will ingest particles, but after a few hours, they will excrete them. For oyster, that will be about 1 day, 2 days, and for mussels will be the same. And so it means that there is no retention and there is no accumulation of microplastics. So in terms of human health, it's very important, because you have the chance to ingest plastics coming from the seafood is very limited, not only because the animals are not keeping them, but also because in the case of fish, for instance, you will clean the fish from a digestive gland and you will just eat the fillet. So there is not so much chances to ingest microplastics. But the question is about nanoplastics, because nanoplastics may not be kept in the digestive gland. They may go across the brush border, the intestinal barriers, and then accumulate in the tissue. So it's not very clear how it works. It's a very recent field. I would say that, I mean, the physiologist and physician will be more efficient in determining whether it is effective or not. It has been suggested by marine scientists at the beginning. It doesn't work for microplastics, but it could work for nanoplastics, and this is really an open field that I will recommend to work and focus on in the next future. You may have seen, for instance, a paper describing that just in a bottle of water, it could be 200,000, more than 200,000 pieces of nanoplastics, because there is a new method that has been developed very, very recently. It's a question of months, and enabling, I mean, to visualize each particles one by one, and then count them. And so it looks like this technique is very promising and may help to assess more precisely what is the risk associated with nanoplastic, when the risk, I mean, after ingestion is limited for microplastics. Next slide, please. One of the most important points is the rafting of species. You see, after the tsunami again, it was shown that after 6 years, all the plastic that were studied by the North American team of scientists, they counted 290 different species, just only the macrofauna, without any assessment of microorganisms, pathogen, or bacteria, or unicellular, and so on. Just only macrofauna, and they found 290 species that have been transported from Japan to North America. So this is exactly the case of the Noah's Ark. I mean, transporting species that may invade, that may mix. It has been the case for one algae, for instance, with some local species and so on. And so we don't have any, I would say, global view, and any we don't have the full understanding of the situation and how, I mean, the transportation may affect the diversity of the different ecosystem. I mean, 300 species in just, I mean, 6 years. It's far more than it has been in the past. You know, the colonization of different continents and so on has been done for millions of years because of wood, floating coconut trees and so on. And that was, I would say, at random. Then after the boats were transporting species, either in the ballast or on the hulls, for instance, but are going from one point to another one straight and at high speed, meaning that, I mean, the species were not able to settle during the course of the ship. And actually, it's if you understand that if you have 5,000 billions of plastic floating, going in different direction very slowly, that it may help to transport far more species, and then there is a real risk that we don't know how to manage actually. Other examples, we have toxic dinoflagellates. It's top right, for instance. We have viruses that are also settling on. The picture in the middle right is about at 2,200 meters. So it means that the settling is also existing at the bottom of the sea, very deep, and may help also to colonize some new environment in the deep sea. And it means that, I mean, it's something that we don't manage. Some species are pathogen at risk, pathogen, dinoflagellates, and so on. And it needs, I mean, more investigation to fully understand that issue. Next slide, please. So we have also socioeconomic impact, either the behavior. Top left, for instance, is a totem I saw in Africa, in Gabon. It was a very nice one, 10 meters high. I mean, impact of the cleaning of beaches, for instance, the chemicals and the injuries on beaches, for instance, the many cost, high cost that may reach 8 to 10 billions of US dollar every year. This is an average evaluation. Probably less in Europe, but I mean, it could be very expensive in some countries. What I will say is that there is no specific measures to dedicate to microplastics, at least maybe one or two, but preventing, for instance, the microplastic in cosmetics to as abrasive to avoid any microplastic going to the environment. This is a measure that is accounting for just only, I mean, hundreds of tons in Europe. And transportation of pellets, for instance, is very important, but we may solve that problem very easily, the spills of pellets. Just moving the containers that are usually at the top, because plastic is not expensive, at the level of the lower in the pile of containers could help to solve that problem. And you see, I mean, dedicated measures to microplastics are not so evident, and most of them are focusing on large debris to prevent them to degrade into microplastics. Next slide, please. What the problem is that we have too many sources. We are 8 billion people living on Earth, and so it's 8 million of sources. That's one point. And then you have the rivers, you have the, I mean, the atmospheric inputs and so on, microplastic. And so it's very, very complex. And for that reason, the solution cannot be unique. And we have to merge different approaches to try to solve the problem. What is important, I will say, is that we have first to understand the plastic cycle. Again, this is a very important point. Then we have to promote prevention and circularity. Give some value. I would say that giving some value at the end of life plastics is very important because if there is some value for the lost plastics, it means that I mean, the people will don't throw away. For instance, if you can recycle one plastic easily, you can understand that the people will collect and then not let them go, I mean, in the wild. And that's very, very important. About cleaning, another type of approach, I would say that it must be, but it can be only selective because of the cost. You cannot clean what is at the bottom of the sea. I mean, 2,000 meters depth is just impossible at this stage. And next slide, please. And I would say that if you want to clean the ocean, so it's not prevention anymore, that will not be for microplastics. I mean, for now, it's very, very complex. It could be for wastewater treatment, but it cannot be for the ocean. So different initiatives, I mean, was started by Kimo in 2010. Ocean cleanup is another example. They have changed the focus and the strategy actually, and looks that it could be efficient as it was not planned to be when they started. NGOs are very active for sure, and also some local, I would say, companies are able to clean, I mean, for beaches, harbors, and so on. There is a real market on that, but I will give the example of the Champion of the Earth in 2023. This is an initiative that is from China, named Blue Cycle, and it's made of more than 6,000 persons, 200 companies, and 11 tons of plastic that has been recycled. And the secret is that not only the people that are involved, but also because they are working through a blockchain. Each plastic is individually identified and proven to come from the sea, collected by more than 9,000 fishing boats all along the coast of Shanghai. This is a part of China, actually. And the blockchain enabled to trace the life cycle of marine plastics. And because of the transparency, this is the reason industry is taking that plastic. So if you want to, start any initiative to recycle plastic from the sea, I think you must identify individually each plastic, or industry will not be interested if they don't know where it comes from. It's not clear about, the nature, the polymer, and so on. And it's really a success, that story. And it's so successful that they are actually upscaling it to the whole coast of China, and started already to implement in Southeast Asia. So I think it could be interesting. Collecting, it becomes industrially relevant. This is very important because it has not been until now, and it was mainly the coming from NGOs, small companies and so on. But large scale company may help to solve that problem, and so there could be some investment in that sector. Next slide, please. Thank you. I will say some words about bioplastics. In fact, the actual production is just 2.5 million tons, so it's not so much. We do have some bio-based raw materials in orange on the slide, and mainly starch. Plastic made of with starch, and you have also PBAT. PBAT is polybutylene adiponate terephthalate. And for each of the we say bioplastics, the biodegradation process is different, indicating that the behavior, the fate in the environment is different, and the management is also different. Some may be composted, some need anaerobic digestion, some need industrial composting, and so on. So it's very complex, but there is some potential, I would say. But the problem is that actually there are 35% in green, down left, 35% of bio-based plastics that are non-degradable. And so the interest may be limited, as it is for plastic that are degradable coming from oil industry as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. I would say that one of the best solutions, we have many solutions: recycling, collection, new materials, water treatment, cleaning, education, and so on. I think that personally, the new materials is a very nice approach. There are many experiments published in the best journal, actually, coming from different laboratories, mainly chemistry lab, and they are trying to recycle and found a solution to recycle the plastics very easily. Until now, it's more often, recycling is more often for, I would say, 4, 5, 6 cycles only. And the recycled plastic is degraded with the time, and so you have to merge with some new plastic, pellets and so on. So it's not really efficient, I would say, but there are some solutions already existing. It's not implemented and upscaled at this stage, but technically in some labs it works already. And you have different approaches, for instance, either enzymes to degrade the plastics and then depolymerize it. There is a good example that is the one on the using diketoamine bonds. This is at the top of the slide, at the bottom of the slide. Interestingly, they are using classical plastics such as ethylene, propylene, and so on, and they are reticulating them with branch that are made of a specific molecules. If you put the plastics in basic solution, then I mean the link that is branching the different polymers together is precipitating, and then it depolymerizes automatically the plastics, and you can reuse it. Not only you can reuse the linker, but you can also reuse the plastics thousands of times. And so it's very, very interesting because it means that it may solve the problem of recycling if the plastics here is crafted this way. And also it gives value, what I was explaining before, it gives value to the plastic. And so that, I mean, there will not be any more plastics on the beaches because the people will just collect because there is some value and then bring back to recyclers and so on and make money with that. So it may help to solve the problem. And I think this is a very important way for the future because we may have in about 10, 20 years from now, I mean, some solution available at the global scale to help. So it's not done already. In laboratories, it works. There are different types of. And I would just say some words about another example that was published also very recently. This is the bottom on the right. I mean, this is a catalytic reaction that has been described that is able to convert plastic and in fuel, but pumping the atmospheric CO2. And so it's a mixed reaction. I mean, just the reaction has been described, actually. It's not implemented in terms of recycling and so on, but it means that pumping the CO2 in the air, you can convert plastics in oil. And this is a way to recycle plastics, but with two different, I would say, interests. The one is to recycle, and the one is also to pump the CO2. So this is a kind of reaction that may help in the future to solve that problem. And I support this kind of approach, even it's for marine scientists like me, it's very complicated to address. Next slide, please. Okay, what are the research challenges actually? I would say that modeling is part of it, even if, I mean, we have more and more models and they are providing more, I would say, relevant scenarios. We have also small particles. I'll just explain about this new approach to visualize directly the nanoplastics. Water treatment is a challenge, actually. Data management and large-scale monitoring. We'll come to that very soon. Next slide, please. So if we want to summarize, I mean, the problem that are linked to the management of microplastics, I would say that prevention of inputs is a way. I mean, washing machine, I mean, filters, for instance, water treatments, sewage, the reuse of sewage containing microplastics, abrasive in cosmetics, the ban of abrasive in cosmetics, for instance, paint particle foam chips, platform, also anti-foulings and so on that are toxic. We may work and try to find plastic without additives also. It's about the release of chemicals, for instance. Degradation of fishing gear, we have to find, I mean, a way to solve that problem. And because, as you know, fishing gear have been invented to kill, and when they are lost, they are also killed. They are just continuing to kill for at least many months. And then the transportation of pellets, what we call directly white ties. It's just a question of management of containers. I come back on that. I mean, you remember that the story of the different accidents. There was one in Vigo in Spain recently, and before in Sri Lanka. There was one in 2011 in Hong Kong, one in South Africa with pellets traveling to Australia. And the problem is that because pellets made of plastic, industrial pellets, you know that pellets are crafted just because if you want to give a shape to a plastic, you have to warm it, thermoformation of plastic, thermoplastics, and it's just impossible to warm and to make plastic melt if you have large block of plastics. I mean, 1 meter cube, 2 meter cubes, because to go inside the core part of the block, that will not be possible. So for that reason, industry is crafting small particles made of 5 millimeters and transport as so. And this is when accidents are coming because of containers, weather, and so on, that they are losing the containers that are containing pellets. And the problem is that because it's at low cost, I mean, pellets are very low cost, they are located at the top of the piles on the container, so that if they are losing them, they will lose something that are not important in terms of cost. So I think it's a very, I would say, ship owner and companies, they just count the cost of containers, but they never take into account the cost of the environment, and this is a problem. But in that situation, it's very simple to manage. You just, put the containers containing pellets at the flotation level, and so there is no problem. They will not lose anymore, and there is not be any risk for the environment, even if some containers at the top are more heavy and the value of the lost materials is higher. Okay, next slide, please.
Francois, we have a couple of minutes left.
Okay,
so
well, I just have a few slides now, so I think that would be okay. Who is doing what? We said that Europe has been very active, and national legislations linked to European Commission are also very important. We have also a lot of global initiatives. In red, those that are considering microplastic directly. You may add also some other Ocean Decade, for instance, but Ocean Decade is not really active. It's more an agreements and with some objectives than really operational work. But you have conventions, UN agencies, IMO, FAO, Regional Sea Convention, UNEA Plastic Treaty, that is very, very important. You have G7 and G20 that are active. We'll come back to that again. The European Marine Strategy Framework Directive and REACH and so on, and also research institutions. And I will say that NGOs are very, very active also in the field of plastic pollution. Next slide, please. So who is doing what? Again, Regional Sea Convention have their regional action plans. Scientific institutions like large-scale platforms, large NGO, but also small NGOs, global platform, regional platforms like MSFD, for instance, national platform. So you see that there are many, many initiatives all together, and sometimes very, very difficult to coordinate and to link them together. What I would say that the plastic treaty under negotiation, actually, I was part of during 5 years of the Scientific Advisory Committee for the UNEA process. And I think we may have a chance to reach an agreement at the end of the year, even if there is some conflictual approaches by different countries and so on, but I think it's very important. And again, the position of European Commission was to support the treaty only if the plastic cycle and microplastics were considered, and this is an important point for microplastics. Next slide. Long-term monitoring is a real question, actually. We do have what we call the International Marine Debris Observing System with very initiative. I would say the database is already in place. EMODNet in Europe is starting to gather information on microplastics, not only, also on beach and seafloor litter. You have the initiative from NOAA, it's mainly from scientific papers, but they connect and with the authors and trying to get all the information and already mapped. And the new one is the work within the G20 done by the Ministry of Japan, and that launched a new database named AOMI, AOMI, this year. It's just a question of weeks only. And it's possible to upload the data on microplastics, and it has been done within the G20 initiative. So it means that it will be a long-term process, and I think that may support, global monitoring. Maybe next slide, please. Okay, we do have different protocols that are available for monitoring. We have also the new guidance in Europe that is providing updated monitoring protocols, even some that are not really implemented in terms of real monitoring. And we do have also some research that has been performed around the work around monitoring. For instance, trying to set up a process to select the best available method for monitoring and so on. And so what we need probably at this stage is our reference protocol for very small microplastics, even nanoplastics. There is no, and it's very expensive. It needs a lot of investment and means, materials, and so on. And it's complicated to have it for regular monitoring, and that will be one of the challenges for the future. Next slide, please. Okay, just some proposed priority. This is what I think, actually. It may be discussed, for sure. New materials, I gave some words on that, recyclability, new additives, and so on, that are not toxic, for instance. Automated method for microplastics. I heard about microfluidics, for instance, that could enable to assess microplastics and small nanoplastics in huge amount of water by very fast filtration, or fluorochrome, for instance. Field evaluation of nanoplastics. Relevant indicator of harm for microplastics, actually just about ingestion, but there is no indicators of real harm, I would say. And besides, from the management side, I would say the cycle of plastics at sea and a coordinates platform that is part of the UNEA to harmonize protocols, collect, and support policymakers in decisions and so on. This is something that will be needed, and that must be still organized. There is some plan. There are some plans for that, but it's not decided. And I think that when the treaty will be signed, then it will be necessary to have that scientific platform, such as IPBS for climate, something like a platform for microplastics to support, policymakers and the plastic treaty. I'm done. I thank you very much for your attention, and I open to any question now.
Thank you, Francois. If we had clapping hands on, I think all of us would do that. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. I'm really in awe how you always give some new information, some new facts on the table. And I was basically writing myself down some stuff while you were speaking. I would be very short with interview because I want to give floor to researchers. So just one question. You mentioned plastic treaty. You are involved in the process or not so much? And you said that we are on a good way to achieve, let's say, optimistic, or let's say very, I don't know, what would you say we're gonna get out of this, or how is it looking like? Are we going to be
I was directly involved in the
scientific
advisory. I was directly involved in the Scientific Advisory Committee from 2016 to 2022, when the negotiations started. I would say the previous work. And then actually, I'm just following through the Ministry of Environment, my state, and France, and then also part of the coalition and so on, but there are different initiatives. I would say that science is not so important at this stage because they are discussing about agreements. But it has been before, and it will be after, when the agreement will be reached. Then there will be a need for the scientific platform, and then organize the global monitoring. This is the reason we are actually starting on that, and also gathering some information to support policymakers and so on. And any initiative will be important, but a dedicated platform will be. So I think that once the country have agreed 173 to negotiate, it was at the end of 2021, it means that they already agreed to reach an agreement, and this is important. So the shape of the agreement is, somewhat very important, I understand, but reaching something will come anyway. What I understood is that when we started the discussion in 2016-17, it was more on marine litter. It was a treaty dedicated to marine environment. And then, step by step, it has moved to the, I would say, plastic pollution and not marine anymore. So I don't feel so important for the marine scientists to be directly involved because it will be more global. For sure, there will be a need for information coming from the marine environment. It's very important, but it's not just only the marine environment, actually. And the reason of the switch is because with a treaty or convention on marine litter only, it could not have been possible to press and to press industry to change the things. It could have been just only informative, saying, okay, we have some problems with the dolphins, sea turtles, and so on. But having a treaty on plastics is more, I would say, relevant in terms of policy making because it may be probably more active. So the questions actually are more around the I would say the ambition of the treaty. Would that be high ambition with a coalition on that?
Yes.
Yes, and this is where we are. But it is more policy at this stage. When we come again to science later, I think.
It's always a question how science can interfere with policy or even with the private sector. So, but on that we will talk about that on a separate occasion. I would now give the floor to researchers. I would just go firstly through the questions that we got when we asked our registrations to give you a question already then. And there was a question from Ajit from India. He studies Master of Science in Marine Biology in Andaman in Nicobar Island, India. Not much research has been done here, but he suspects that due to high tourism, the levels of plastic and microplastics are quite high. What steps should he take with his research? What would you suggest him to do? Ajit, is that what you wanted to ask? You can turn on your camera or your microphone even and put some extra thoughts to it. Or...
First, the basic research is the most important, to have the main information, amounts, where there are accumulation, type of plastics and so on before they take any measure. And then, I mean, try to have something like setting priorities and so on the main plastics and the population to educate and so on. That will be step by step as it is usually, I would say. But I mean, starting from the basis is quite important. I will add, this is very interesting, I will add that I've been working for the European Commission last month to set up a call on the Europe-India research on the marine litter. And there will be some funding for that, and that will be a place, I would say, to apply and get some support to work on that in India. Yeah.
Francois, I have a question maybe for all of them. Are you available for a contact after this event? If they can write to you like on your email or something like that, are you available for that?
Yes, I am, unless I will save 1,000 million.
Okay, well, if there is something really urgent or somebody would like,
Yes, no problem. I'm open. I will answer anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Anil asked how to quantify the microplastics. Which technique is better for complete microplastic analysis?
It's complicated because we have different approaches and depend on the topic and the scope. If you want to monitor, you cannot go down to small microplastics. It's difficult. You have a lot of contamination. You need important system, LIDF, for instance, Raman and so on, and it's not relevant for monitoring. Actually, some European projects have been focusing on the use of fluorochrome, trying to have a fast method and automated. I do like the concept of microfluidics. It's just a few papers actually, but it may help to filter large amount of waters and to assess microplastics. But then you have the collection of water, of samples, and then you have the analysis. You see, so it's complicated. The main principle, the main idea is that either if you go down in the size of microplastics and the characterization of polymer, that will be more and more lab studies, and that will not go out of. So you will have some basic information. So the need, I will say, for the proposed priorities, as I said at the end of my talk, is that we need automated methods for microplastics. At this time, is not really existing. Only 6% automated. Yeah.
Okay, Anil, I hope we replied to your question. If you need anything to add on, just write it in the chat or just turn on your microphone. If not, then we will continue with Gopi Krishna. How does the synergistic effect of different physicochemical parameters affect the leaching of plastics into aquatic food web of meiobenthos?
Well, my feeling is that there is no transfer for microplastics. The question is mainly for small microplastics or more nanoplastics about transfer, trophigens and so on, food web. Each step may be independently affected by. I mean, some will retain because they are filter feeding, for instance. They will ingest more. Some will not because they are carnivorous and so on. But it's complicated to have because we don't have so much information. We don't know how they sink to the bottom. They sink to the bottom, for instance. We don't know how each species is ingesting, how they are reacting, and so on. How physically it may impact. I mean, during digestion, for instance, injuries of gut and so on. I mean, we don't have a full description of that. So it's difficult to have a global view on that. And considering, I mean, the ocean like an organism, and when you go, it's like medicine, you know. If you want to go, I mean, the details in different parts of the bodies and so on, and that's what is happening. That it took about centuries. It took centuries for that, and we don't know most about. And for the ocean, it's just starting, so it's really complicated too. And it's more ideas that are coming step by step, you know, filling the gaps and trying to support a better understanding of the situation. So it's not really clear, and I think it's complicated to well define the interaction, physical, chemical parameters effect on the aquatic food web, for instance. I mean, at this stage, I'm not sure it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, be realistic.
Okay. Let's continue with Svetlana's question. She asked you for recommendation on any scientific literature, how to avoid self-contamination, a very major issue in the research of microplastic.
Who knows? I mean, a white room is necessary, but is very expensive, I would say. And avoiding, I mean, plastic in the air, for instance. So you may try different system. I mean, I remember Katarina Tsangaris from HCMR, she was covering the microscope with a plastic sheet and to avoid any contamination of the samples after. And so it's really complicated. Each have, for that reason, the monitoring actually, MSFD or any other monitoring, is with larger particles to avoid, I mean, all the problems that could interfere with, I mean, evaluation amounts and so on. Yes, I understand the question. I'm not really sure how to answer. I mean, there are many ideas to do, but it's not really clear. Yeah.
Yes, Svetlana, if I may guide you to contact Dr. Gabriela Kalčíková. She's a researcher here in Slovenia, very well aware of this problem, and perhaps she will be able to guide you more in your question. Maybe we can stay in contact after the event. Then we have two more questions which are addressing a little bit more political type of questions. What are the major challenges in addressing plastic pollution, especially when considering the varying economic interests of governments and large corporations? How can we develop effective solutions and policy approaches?
Well, I think, I mean, each have its own position. There is one point that is relevant to all: recycling. Recycling is one solution. It's not perfect, but I mean, it's one solution. It's okay for the public. It's okay for the NGOs, most of them. It's okay for the industry because it creates job and money. It's okay for the government because it's also create job and so on, and it's a way to solve. The problem is that recycling is not really efficient for now. It's just starting, but this is a way to. Then, I mean, management of recycling is complex because if you use biodegradable plastics and you ban plastic, there is no primary matter to fill in recycling companies. And this is a reason, for instance, why France, for instance, delayed the ban of single-use plastics to 2040 because they invested billions and billions of euros in recycling plants. And in fact, after investing, now there is no matter to operate the recycling plants. I mean, it's just investment closed, you know? And so for that reason, it's complicated. But there is an agreement about recycling that it could be a way to. It's not perfect. I mean, recycling could be improving, especially using new materials that will favor recycling of thousands of times different plastics. And I think that, I mean, this is a good way to search on and trying to find a way to, because there is no, I mean, if you look at, I mean, cleaning the ocean, for instance, it's just, I mean, as we said, activity that would fit with just only a few types of plastic on beach because you give the patrimonial value back the patrimonial value back to the beach, you know, that's one point. Or, I mean, cleaning the fishing gear on the seafloor because they are, you can repair them, you can reuse them, and Slovenia is a very good example on that. And so I think that it's not a solution that will fit with all communities. But recycling, there is a way to for everybody, and so I think it could be the best. And in recycling, I will support not only the collection and so on, but also the new materials that will favor a best recycling.
Okay, I think that replies also to Janto's question. What is your stance on the circular economy and recycling? So I think we can now move on to the questions from our chat. Yeah, that's a great presentation. Thank you, Rafat. Okay, so it's basically no questions. Are there any questions now from participants in the chat? Okay, what are the scopes? Okay, what are the scopes on introduction of microorganisms which can degrade plastics and use them as a source of carbon in areas like Great Garbage Patch, which can live in the biofilms on microplastics? And yeah, eventually degrade them.
Well, I think that the best idea is to use reactors. So it has been, I mean, selecting bacteria, for instance, or selecting enzymes. In fact, if bacteria are degrading, that will be a system, enzymatic system, and some are already considering, I mean, isolating and manipulating the enzymes to have more efficiency and so on. If you look at wastewater treatment, most of them, they are using bacteria that are fixed on plastics. You know, this biomedia system, increasing the surface so that it's more microorganisms and so on. And this is the way to degrade. But in any case, it cannot be, I mean, releasing bacteria in the wild. It's not, it's a nonsense. Huh? It's just, I mean, in reactors, or in wastewater plants and so on, but it must be well controlled, I would say.
Okay. We have a question from Ahmed Yamiu. The new material, does this mean redesign existing plastic or another type of material?
Say again, I'm sorry.
Is this, when you talk about new material, are you referring to new kind of plastic or a completely new material?
I mean, no. I think it's more plastics that are prepared to be recycled. So the example I gave was about this branching of polymers. For instance, I mean, you take ethylene or propylene, and then you branch them, you polymerize them, and then you reticulate them, and the linker may be precipitated, and I mean, regenerate the polymers directly that you can reuse. But the final product is the same. This is a polypropylene, this is a polyethylene, but it's just that you can recycle it. And so this is the same materials. New materials is another story. We gave already 8 Nobel Prizes to inventors of polymers. So we may expect that the next Nobel Prize will be to a new polymer that is more, I mean, environmental friendly, probably. But I mean, I don't know about that. This is really chemistry.
Yeah. Dilra, I hope you got your reply on that. Janto is asking, do you have an opinion about citizen science data in microplastic research?
Well, when the people are skilled or well, I would say, educated for, I think it's perfect. And the point is that it may bring more data than, I mean, any scientific institution. And so it could be very powerful. We have large, I mean, you know, the field of plastics research is maybe the first field where citizen science is very active. And the NGOs are very active as well, I mean, cleaning and so on. And so large NGOs, Ocean Cleanup, for instance, is not, no, sorry, Ocean Coastal Cleanup is a bit different. They are assessing and they are, I mean, trying to find solutions and so on. They are very, very active. It's not just only on microplastic for that, but I mean, there is some space for the dedicated, I would say, NGO and participative science on. But I mean, the way to could be very different. For instance, if you need computers to model to predict the transportation of microplastics. Large computer, you may just use the time available in any computer that is in a network to work for you. You know, this is also citizen science. So it could be just, it's not just only going at sea and sampling, but it could be very efficient in participating in research anyway.
Okay, Anto says thanks. I would kindly ask all of you who are here with us to turn on your cameras or just to raise your hand and speak to Dr. Galgani directly. In the meantime, we got a question from Rifat Yahan Rakib from Bangladesh. I want to, probably he wants to investigate the marine pollution caused by ships in Bangladesh. If you have any suggestions or contact information regards to Bangladesh ship pollution.
I think that the best would be to link with the international institution or the large NGO. Sometimes they are organizing cruises and so on. I remember the one from, I think it was Norway that was reporting that. Gizamp was involved, and it was a transect from starting from the Gulf of Bengal. So it could have been from Bangladesh, for instance, to South Africa. And this kind of cruises, for instance, could be helpful to support, any research and sampling and so on. And why not in Bangladesh? Yeah.
Okay, Ahmed, you raised your hand. You can turn on your camera and microphone.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know, maybe my internet will be able to, so I probably would not do without the video. Yeah.
We hear you well. We hear you well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. This was very informative and quite global in your approach. Thank you very much for very good work. My questions are, you mentioned about maybe the need, the less need for science during the negotiation of the Global Plastic Treaty. But I wanted to get more clarification about that. Do you think that it will not be more effective if the negotiator actually listens to science to shape the direction of the final outcome of the document? For instance, in the INC4 in Ottawa, there were a lot of controversy about agreeing on a global target for reducing plastic production globally. This was not included, for instance, in the intersectional work, which, of course, many stakeholders believe this should have been a number one priority, not just the chemicals and finance. But with the other two, which was agreed upon, intersectional work. But for the reduction, what is your position about this? And what is your position as in science in this, for instance? And secondly, I want to know if you, for instance, you have schools who are very proactive in microplastic research that you could recommend for individual interested in research in microplastic and, of course, in nanoplastic. Yeah, thank you very much. These are my questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I would say that we had to face the same question when implementing monitoring and reduction measures in Europe, and with the TGML in which participated Andrea. And the point is that you have different types of targets for states or for the treaty or for any, I would say, regional institution or regional agency, for instance. You have either operational target, you have environmental targets, you have political targets, and the complexity is to merge all of them. So for environment, for instance, the target of zero plastic is the best, for sure. But it's just impossible. And so for that reason, the politicians, policymakers, they have to set up targets that are, I would say, more political. And for that, it may not fit with, depending on the country and the participants in the negotiation. And this is the reason of the conflicts. For instance, when we had the discussion in Europe, NGO were supporting to have a reduction target of 50% by 2020. It was in 2013 when we started that discussion. The ministry, they said, we are okay with that. There is no problem. We cannot reach that. It's just impossible technically. And you see, this is where the questions are. And so the idea is to have, common target that may be reached in agreement with all the parties. And in Europe, the way we solve that question is setting thresholds. So first was, knowing about the baselines, where we are, what we are in the environment, and then trying to find what is good for the environment and what is not good, at what level of plastic is good and what level is not. It's something very complex, for a beach, for instance, because it may be good in terms of for the birds, but it cannot be for tourism, you see. And so when you have the thresholds, then you will define a target that is related to, that is science-based. And then, because of policies, you may not reach it in just a short period. And for that reason, the next step will be to define intermediary targets that will enable to go step by step and reach at the end, what is good for the environment. So you see the first step are to define, the baselines, then the thresholds, what is good, what's called the good environmental status, and then define naturally from the threshold that will be normally the target, at least scientific or environmental, and then the policymaker will have to adapt to reach, even if it takes a long time. The idea is to go the good direction so that it's okay. This is the okay. And then about I would say courses and so on microplastics. UNEP is organizing sessions on that, and also I know that some scientific institutions do. I've been invited to give a lecture that will be a summer school on microplastic that will be held in Italy, for instance, next October. And this is one example, and I suppose that there are many, many others. And I think the best is just to link with them and trying to find either a support to do, or if not possible, a way to either closer to you, or you see, I think that China is organizing some also, and normally there is some courses to learn how to assess microplastics that is becoming more and more common, actually. The problem is that there is no, I would say, agreement on the best method for small particles, and this is a problem.
Well, I was thinking in between while you were talking that I would invite all who have additional questions maybe to write me an email, and I will combine all of them together and write them to Francois in email, and we will let you know his reply afterwards. Otherwise, please raise your hand. Anybody from Slovenia, Croatia, or Adriatic region, if you are here, this is the time to speak. So if there are questions, I would kindly invite all of you. Okay, they are all thankful for the great and interesting lecture and discussion. Thank you, Anya. Okay, if then we have no further question, I would end the official part of the event.